Hello and welcome again to JP's Misadventures. Today's story is one that comes from my very early childhood. My mother used to work at a grocery store and had a very early shift. Well, because of that very early shift, she would get me up, bundle me up, and take me to a babysitter's house very early in the morning. I think we'd get up around 4:30, and or she'd get me there, and then she'd go to work. And then, of course, in the afternoons, when she got off, she'd come back and pick me up. Now, I was around 3 years old, uh, and I remember this quite clearly. But she took me to the babysitter's house, and usually I'd wait until the sun came up, and then I'd wake the babysitter up and ask her for some breakfast. And she'd usually give me some cereal, or she'd actually sometimes she'd even make breakfast, oatmeal and bacon and eggs and that kind of stuff. Well, this particular day, sunset came, or excuse me, sunrise came, and I attempted to wake her up, and she wouldn't get up. So I kind of knocked around in the kitchen looking for some cereal and some milk. I figured I'd fix myself something, and there wasn't anything. There wasn't any milk, and there wasn't any bread. I thought, well, I could have a cheese sandwich or something like that. There wasn't anything to eat. So I attempted to wake her up again, and just wasn't happening. Well, I waited a little while, kind of let her sleep a little longer, maybe 30 minutes went by, and I attempted to wake her up again. Well, this time she woke up and told me to leave her the hell alone, and she's going back to sleep. Well, I didn't really take that very well because I was hangry. Children, when they get hangry, they do stupid stuff. Well, her front door was standing wide open. Of course, she had a screen door, and the screen door was shut, but it wasn't locked. So out that screen door I went. And here I went across the city of Benton from South Sevier Street, which is out by the airport, to Lillian Street, which is just off of Military Drive there. It's about a 3.7 mile one-way trip. And as a 3-year-old, I knew where I was going. My mother drove us that way every day. I knew where our house was and everything. So I started walking up Sevier Street. Of course, that takes you to just one block off of the town square. And just a block past that is basically the turn onto Lillian Street. And I got on Lillian Street. And I walked down Lillian to our house. Well, when I got to our house, I tried the front door, but of course it was locked. Of course, I was this little kid. I wasn't thinking about that. But I went around to the back door to try the back door just in case. And of course, our dog, we had a standard poodle named Ginger. And of course, she was ginger and covered. That's why we called her Ginger. And she was just going nuts. Well, I told her, just calm down and everything. It's just me. And she did. And I thought, well, do I sit here until mom gets off work, or do I just go ahead and walk on over to where she works? Now, where she worked, the grocery store was, probably 4, maybe 5 blocks from the town square, but it was back towards our side, back towards our house, on the same side of the square, basically. So I walked on up to the grocery store, and of course, when I get there, I see my mom's car. She had a 1968 blue Oldsmobile Cutlass 4-door. And I don't know if you remember those old cars like that. They used to have nylon interiors. And this one had those nice nylon seats. Anyway, I was walking up to the car from back, and through the glass, I see my mama come around the corner of the store. And she was mad. I could tell she's mad. Steam coming out her ears. She looked like a bull getting ready to charge somebody. She's that kind of man. Well, I was standing right there beside the car, and I kind of panicked, so I opened the back door. Luckily for me, it was unlocked. And I jumped in, and I hid in the floorboard. Well, she didn't see me get in the car, but she did see a flash of light from the glass from the door closed. Saw the door closed. So she ran over to the car and she opened the back door and she found me. And she picked me up and hugged me. And I mean, she had tears in her eyes. She said, "Oh, thank the good Lord, you're okay. You know, where have you been?" And I told her, the story that I tried to wake the babysitter up 3 different times because I was hungry. She didn't have nothing there to eat. And she finally basically cussed me and told me to leave her alone, let her sleep. And I decided just to walk to the house because I was hungry. I got to the house and the house was locked. So I decided to come up here where you were. Of course, that's when you came out. Well, she was just happy as she could be, that I was safe and I was okay. And of course, she had just gotten the phone call. Now, this is probably about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, I'd been over at that lady's house since about, I guess, 5 o'clock. And she had basically just noticed that I was missing. I mean, because she just called my mother and said, "Hey, he ain't here. I can't find him." And of course, she called the police and fire department and everybody else. Of course, my grandfather, he worked for the city. He actually ran the shop that repaired all the police cars and the city cars and fire trucks and all the maintenance vehicles and stuff. And everybody knew my grandfather and everybody knew me, because everybody knew I was his grandson. And I only figured, because it was small town, rural, that's why nobody stopped this 3-year-old walking down the street, is because, well, even then I walked with confidence, much like I do today. But I'm sure most of them that did start out after me went, "Oh no, that's Amos Kazee's grandson. He's all right. Ain't nothing gonna happen to him." And that's all I can figure. Anyway, Mom, set me up in the car and everything. We went to that babysitter's house, and of course, the police were there, the firemen were there, and they were literally beating the bushes looking for me, screaming my name and everything else. And that little old babysitter, she's just pacing back and forth on her front porch. Well, my mama pulled up, and she got out, and the little old babysitter yelled at her, "We hadn't found him yet." She says, "That's all right. He found me." And she said, "Excuse me?" She says, he came to my work and met me at the car." So all the police officers and firemen and everything were very relieved. And of course, so was the babysitter. And anyway, my mother basically told her, she says, I know you're a church member and everything." She says, "But you will not be getting paid for this. And not only that, not only you will not be babysitting my child anymore, you won't be babysitting any children anymore. Period. End of discussion." Well, the young lady got a little hot and bothered all about this and started screaming and yelling at my mother. And my mother looked at her and she says, "You're real lucky. If the police are still here," she says, "because I get up there and just slap your teeth down your throat." And I'll never forget that police officer says, "We can leave." And my mother says, "No, that won't be necessary." She says, "I'm going to be the Christian woman today." And she bundled me back up in the car and we left. Now, my mother remembers this story a little differently. And she told me how she remembered it. I don't remember it that way. But, I've got a real good memory of things from when I was very young. Matter of fact, just that previous year, right before Christmas, I had a clown doll, homemade clown doll that my great grandmother made me, and on my mother's side. And I love that clown doll. I really did. It's kind of star shaped and everything. He had him a nice little pink pointed hat and everything with little tassels on top. He's just, he was my doll. And I accidentally dropped him on the floor furnace. He caught on fire. And I tell you what, as a 2-year-old, I was just beside myself. I couldn't believe I done burned up my clown. Anyway, that Christmas, I got a new clown doll for Christmas. Handmade by my grandmother. But I also got another little doll. Uh, forgive me, I'm trying to remember the name of it now, and I know the name of it. Dapper Dan. That's the name of the doll, the Dapper Dan doll. And the Dapper Dan doll was kind of an educational doll. His little vinyl shoes actually had laces in it that you could, you know, lace up and tie. He had buttons, he had snaps, and he had zippers, and all the normal things that the child needs to learn how to do to dress themselves was on that Dapper Dan doll. And I just thought that was the neatest thing I'd ever seen. And of course, I got the requisite, toy trucks and those types of things as well. And if I remember right, I got a G.I. Joe that year too. Now this would have been, let's see, this would have been the Christmas of '72. But the reason I remember it so well is, of course, Silver Bells was the popular song that year. But it was also the first in-color dream I ever remember having. My very first dream I ever remember having, and it was in color. And that dream was me attending the birth of Christ. Now, I know where this came from. Of course, in Sunday school, they told us the reason for this season. Everything, told us the whole manger story and everything. But not only that, that night on television, they did the little drummer boy, the little claymation drummer boy. And we sat and watched it. So all that was, real fresh in my memory. And I'm sure that's why I dreamed about it. But I remember that I was there, and it wasn't claymation. He was in full color. And it wasn't, it wasn't cartoony, but a little bit, but you're talking about little kid's eyes. So, but I do remember that as being my very first dream. And I do remember that Silver Bells was the popular song that year. And I do remember getting those particular toys and everything. People say you can't remember things like that, but I do. And that's because I have an eidetic memory. Now, some people call that a photographic memory, but that's not really true. Photographic memory is kind of a misnomer. Eidetic memory is basically things that you have experienced, read, done. You can bring them back up in your memory, literally in your mind's eye, and you can see every detail. Or if it's something you read, you can actually see the page and you can read that page right out of your memory. And it's something that I've always had, and it's something that I also practice constantly to try and improve my memory, because now that I'm getting older, I find myself sometimes coming downstairs and then wondering, okay, what did I come down here for? Some of you older folks will understand this. I use little tricks, though. Sometimes I will send myself a text message as to why I'm going downstairs. And when I get down there and I forget why I went down there, all I have to do is look at my phone. There's a little tip for you. Now, I hope y'all enjoyed this little story and everything. I sure do enjoy telling them. So make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and the reminder bell so you get the new one every time I post. Y'all have a good day.